What's going on, everyone? My name is Cyan. In today's Satisfactory video, I'm going to be showing you how to make more power for your factory with the Diluted Packaged Fuel alternate recipe. Diluted Packaged Fuel is an alternate recipe unlocked after researching the fluid packaging milestone in the MAM. This allows us to take the residual heavy oil residue that we have, and instead of using residual fuel, getting 40 fuel for every 60 heavy oil residue, we can instead use 30 heavy oil residue and 60 packaged water to give us 60 packaged fuel. This can be super powerful in the early to mid game because you need a lot of power for refineries and more mines and all sorts of stuff. So it's a really, really good recipe to get early on and use to power up your base. All right, so I've got 4 designs for you today. They all stem from one basic design that we're going to start building right now. So you can use a Mk.1 or Mk.2 designer, whatever you have available. For access early on, I'm going to use a Mk.1 so that more people can use it, and then we will switch to the Mk.2 for the remaining designs. So to start out, we're going to take a refinery. We want the inputs or the orange side near the terminal, and you want it centered on the second line there. Place that down, switch to a packager, and we want to bring this so that it is on the same line right here and as close to the refinery as we can get it. We're going to create a closed loop using belts so that we do not have to constantly supply this with empty canisters. So we'll put one packager down on the front, and we're going to do the same thing on the back. You can see these line up. All right, to make our connections, it's very simple. We're going to go from the packager into the refinery, both packagers, and then back into the refinery. Let's set some recipes, starting with the first packager, set to package water, and we're going to drop in 100 empty canisters. This way we don't have to do that every time we put it down. The next is the refinery, and we're going to set that to, of course, make the diluted packaged fuel. Now we can check our numbers as we go. We're producing 60 packaged water, and of course needing 60 empty canisters. The recipe here calls for 60 packaged water and 30 heavy oil residue, which we'll take care of soon, and gives us 60 packaged fuel. If we switch over to the last packager, we can see that if we unpackage fuel, it takes 60 packaged fuel and gives us 60 of empty canisters and fuel. So the canisters can travel along, we don't lose any or need any more, so it's a perfect closed loop. And the fuel we can take out and do whatever we want with. This has been done for a long time by a lot of different people. This is just my take on it, and the ability to upgrade it and use it in different ways is kind of where I think this is a little more unique. So with the belts placed, it's time to put down the pipes. Now I need some scaffolding to run our pipeline, so we're going to put down 2 4-meter foundations and then switch to a 2-meter foundation and put that on the back. We're going to take our pipeline junctions, and just so it's easy to follow along, I'm going to lock it in place in the middle and nudge it down twice. That's going to be for heavy oil residue. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the water, lock it in the middle. This time I'm going to nudge it up 3 times and lock that down. Now we can make our connection over to the refinery, and I like to use horizontal to vertical. It just looks nicer, but you can do whatever you want. For this, I'm just going to do a simple turn and go right in. I'll delete the support. And for the water connection, this is even easier. We can just go straight in like that. It's not perfect, but it works for me. Now we can get rid of our foundations. And the last thing we need is a fuel output. So I'm going to go in the center of this third column here, right? 1, 2, 3. And then on the center line of the designer, place it down. And then horizontal to vertical, we're just going to go right in and keep it nice and simple. It doesn't have to be anything overly fancy. All right, so for the finishing touches here, I like to add some painted beams in the corners of the packagers. I just go up 12 meters on each corner, and we're going to use this to run power and just give it a little decorative touch. Once those are in place, I like to put a simple ceiling down as well. So for this, I use the frame floor. I'll use H to lock it in place and then nudge it into position. And I'll do the same thing for the other side. Once those are done, we can get rid of the 4-meter foundations, and we can now run our power. So I will take power from the packager and place an outlet. We'll go through to the back and connect up to the front packager, and then connect up to the refinery. So now we have a way to transfer power through the designs, as well as all of our fluids. And the last thing I like to do is throw some color so that we can quickly see what's what and not get too confused, because I get a little confused. So I'll do blue for water, purple for heavy oil residue, orange is good for fuel. And that's that. So this is the Mk.1 Design. I had something I forgot to mention, but for ease of startup, we're going to turn off all of the machines so that we can build buffers up and have a little more control and avoid the seesawing effect that happens. All right, so I've done a very simple setup here for our file. Just included the cost to run it and then what we get out of it. So with that saved, we're going to clear out the Mk.1 Designer and we're going to move into the Mk.2. All right, shifting gears into the Mk.2 Designer now, we're going to set up the all-in-one design as well as the 2 slooped variations. So to get started, let's do the all-in-one. Now, first thing we're going to do is grab the Mk.1 Design. Since we can't load it into the blueprint, we're just going to place it down instead. And we want to set it up so that it is centered on this axis again and all the way left. Once that's in place, we are going to add our fuel generators. Now there's the perfect amount of room on the right side of the design to place down 2 fuel generators. And in order to make sure these consume the correct amount of fuel, which is 60, we need to put a power shard in each. And like earlier, I recommend turning both off. Now to make our connection, we're going to keep this super simple. We're going to switch to noodle mode, and you can get a very simple 90-degree turn. That's about the best looking one you can get. And we can go right into the junction. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. To get power over here, you can either just run power poles, or I like to do a nice little decorative thing again with the painted beams to build up 2 12 meters that are in line with the other side. And then behind each of the generator outlets, we're going to go up 9 meters. Do that on both sides. And then from the corners, I just like to go into diagonal mode, and we're just going to connect up the tops. And yeah, it just gives a little something, kind of looks nice. So to get power over here, we have connection that we can take from. So I like to put it on the front and then go straight across. And then you can just work your way over. We can connect up both generators. All right, the last thing I did was just really quickly went and added some scaffolding so that it's easier to get around and access each of the machines. But for startup, you're going to need to be able to get into each one occasionally and turn them on, turn them off, do that sort of thing. So it's nice to have some access when you don't have the ability to fly around. All right, so I've got the file set up here. You can see I've mainly just changed the icon and to show that we're now producing power. All right, so to start the Sloop designs out, we are, again, going to use the Mk.1 blueprint to create our foundation. So we'll set it up just like the last time on the center line and make sure it's all the way to the left. Go ahead and place that down. Now, this design is going to take the 60 package fuel we're making and turn that into 300. So you're going to drop in 3 power shards and 2 summer sloops, and that's going to give us 300 package fuel per minute. Now, this number is going to increase significantly to a little over 400 megawatts, but I promise it's worth it. So the first variant that we're going to do is a design that allows you to take 150 fuel and turn that into power or turbo fuel, whatever you want. And the other 150 packaged fuel can stay packaged because it doesn't need to stay in the closed loop. And you can use that to fuel trucks, drones, your jetpack, whatever you want without having to make canisters as an added cost. Of course, the power cost is quite high, but the convenience and compactness that you're able to generate a good amount of packaged fuel in is pretty powerful. All right, so the main change we need to make is over here on the output side. This Mk.3 belt will no longer work, so we're going to switch that out. But first, we're going to put down a smart splitter. We want to have it so the input is facing the refinery, of course. We're going to upgrade to a Mk.4 belt because we're now dealing with that 300 packaged fuel per minute. We want to set the smart splitter up so that the packager is getting all the fuel that it needs, and then any overflow will be sent forward. You can go to the left too, wherever you want, and then that can be reconnected with a Mark III belt. Now the packager, thankfully, if we drop in 3 power shards, we can see that it jumps up to 150 fuel per minute, and we need 150 packaged water per minute. The same thing happens with the water packager, jumping to 150 packaged water per minute. So the loop stays maintained. We don't have to change anything. Just by adding the power shards, it does the job for us. Now, what you can do with the packaged fuel, if you want, you can put down a truck station right in this blueprint and line it up so that it can take the fuel from right here. You can put down a container so that it goes into storage. I'm going to leave it just open for the next design that we're doing, but it's very flexible. You also have the 150 fuel still coming off of here, so that's enough to power 3 fully overclocked generators. So that's a lot of power that you'll be able to work with, and essentially this produces enough power to make up for the high energy cost. All right, so I got this one all set up. We are showing that we are now taking a lot more heavy oil residue and water, but we're producing way more fuel, and that we're producing 2 types of it. So we can go ahead and save that. And now we're going to keep this in place, and we're going to set up the variant to make 300 fuel per minute. Now it's very simple. I'm sure you can already figure it out. We're just going to put down another packager and have it connect into the system. So take a packager, place it right next to it. You want to have 2 spaces in between them. And we're going to copy these settings over so that everything is the same, and turn it off as well. Now in this scenario, we want this one to be on right away. So we can go ahead and just turn that on. Because of the doubling effect of the summer sloop, these 100 canisters are going to get very quickly doubled, and this will overflow, and then excess will go into the other side. Now, in order to get the items over here, because of the height of the pipelines and everything, we have to make a compressed lift. So to set up the compressed lift, we're going to take out a conveyor pole, and I'm going to fully clip the lift into the splitter. So I'm going to go 1 space away and rise up 1. And then using a Mark III lift, I'm going to lock it in with H, nudge it so that it's into the splitter. Click and then rotate. You'll see that it snaps down into a shorter height. And then we can delete the conveyor pole. We're going to drag the belt over to where we want. So I need to go in there. So we're going to go 1 shy of that point. And then again, we're going to take out a Mark III lift using H to lock it in place. Then you're going to nudge it back once, click, and rotate, and it will snap to the belt. And delete the pole, and there you go. That's a compressed lift, and it's hooked up to the system here. We also, of course, need to connect the outputs together. So now this is a full Mark 1 belt. If you want, you can upgrade these to Mark 2s if you're going to chain several together, or just keep them at Mark 1s and send this into whatever kind of setup you want. Now, to take care of the canisters that are extra, we can do a couple of things. You can either put these into storage and use them for something else that you need in your factory and not have to make empty canisters, or you can sync them for points and just keep the system running. I'm just going to set up a very simple overflow line on the outside here, and using straight mode, we're just going to snap right in. So this is going to run along the outside of the design, and you can either chain these together, again, into storage, or a sink, or another component of your factory. Now the final step is to get power over here. So we're going to build the same beam cage as earlier. And then again, we're going to add a frame floor on top. And to bring power, do the same thing as before with the outlets. All right, so I got everything set up here. Just change the output to show the 300 fuel. And I use the summer sloop just so it's a little easier to tell between the 2 fuel types here. So that way we don't have confusion with the Mark 1. But there we go. We've got our 4 designs. Everything is set up, so let's go ahead and do some tests. Once you have a good location set up, you can place down your design. These are tileable, so once you place down one, you're able to expand down the row as far as you can. So I recommend building this in a place with a lot of open space, like maybe out on the water or on a nice elevated platform. All right, so I've gone ahead and connected up our inputs and power. So let's go ahead and start this thing up. The first thing I like to do is turn on the refinery and let that fill up with heavy oil residue. So once this is full, we're going to turn this back off. From the water packager now, we're going to turn this on and make sure it's filling up with water and starting to run, which it is. Now we want this to run until it's in about the low 70s, high 60s. So now that we see that number hitting 70s, let's go ahead and turn this on. We can see we got a nice buffer here to work from. If we just let it run, it would take a really, really long time, possibly never, to get extras in here, and would just kind of always be starting and then stopping. So it would be not super ideal. Now over here, we can see the packaged fuel is doing the same thing. It's building up, and we're going to look in the water packager again. And once we see that get into the mid 30s, which it looks like it's hitting, we're going to go ahead and turn on the fuel unpackager. And the same thing applies. It's building up a nice buffer, starting to run, and we'll now start filling up the generators. So if we run over here, we can see the generators are starting to fill, but because they're turned off, they're not running, which is exactly what we want. We want both of these to fill up completely, and I recommend waiting until you have fuel backed up in the packager, which means the entire system is full, before turning on the fuel generators. So that does take maybe 2 or 3 minutes per blueprint, but once you do it, if you do it properly, they run very steadily and there's no real hiccups or issues. All right, so it's been a few minutes and the packager is starting to backlog with fuel. So let's turn on both of our generators. And to deal with the excess fuel, we're just going to click and drag it out of the packager, and we can see that it's now returning to normal operation with no backlogs. Don't make me a liar. There we go. So it'll run steadily now, and as we can see, everything is maintaining the roughly 30 packages in each, and all of our machines have been running at 100% efficiency. Looking over at the power grid, we can see we're nice and stable now, and these little hiccups here and there are probably coming from the refineries, so that's not something that we really have to worry about. All right, so for the Sloop designs, I've hooked everything up, got the power set up. The setup is exactly the same really as the other ones. We're going to start off with the refinery, get that filled up with heavy oil residue, then switch the packager on. I again like to let this run until it's worked its way through a good portion of the canisters, and then we turn on the refinery. And like before, we're going to wait until this has worked through a steady amount again, and we can turn on the fuel packager. Now everything's going to happen a lot faster here because it's all overclocked and we're dealing with greater quantities, but that is a very simple startup, and we're now running. So for both of these, I'm just sending them into storage for the sake of the demonstration, but we can see fuel building up here and packaged fuel right here. So again, this can power drones, trucks, your jetpack, whatever you want. And this can be used to make turbo fuel, power generators, all sorts of stuff. We can see that this is consuming, like I said, just over 400 megawatts. And between the two packagers, we are nearing 500. We're at about 470 or so. But it's still a pretty reasonable turnaround considering everything that you get out of this very small footprint. All right, for the last design, that was fitting. All right, so for the last design, before I was so rudely interrupted, you can see that the first packager will start to run and we'll get the majority of the fuel. Any extra will be sent over to the second one, but because it's not turned on, it's not running. This closed loop will maintain itself and everything will be sent into our fluid buffer down here. You can wait until that's full and then turn on the second packager. All right, so once the packager is at 100, see we've already got a lot building up in here. We're going to turn on the next packager. That will start to fill up and work. Excess is working its way into some storage for now. And as we can see, packaged fuel is now working its way in, and we are producing the full 300 per minute as promised. So anyway, this is the end of the video. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like. It helps me out a ton. If you want to grab these blueprints for yourself and don't feel like setting them up, I will have links down below in the description. So be sure to check those out. I got a Google Drive and a Discord. So if you're into those kind of things, links are available. They're always free and they always will be. Alrighty. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Enjoy the game. Peace.